Imagine a world where the hoofbeat was law, and the endless steppe a relentless battlefield. Amidst Mongolia's warring tribes, lost in cycles of vengeance, a child named Temüjin was born. A blood clot in his fist, an omen of a destiny both extraordinary and brutal. Betrayed in youth, his father slain, his family cast out, fate seemed a cruel, unyielding master. But from the deepest despair, an iron will was forged. He didn't just endure hardship, he carved his legend from it. From the hunted, he became the hunter. He would unite the fractured, transform nomadic horsemen into an unstoppable force, and etch a new name into history. Genghis Khan. This is the story of an impossible ascent, of military genius, and the fiery dawn of an empire that would forever reshape the world. And that was merely the first brushstroke in the epic portrait of the man who would shake the world. If Temüjin's story has already captivated you, if you feel the stirrings of an extraordinary destiny unfolding, please show your support with a like to fuel this journey. And if you don't want to miss a pivotal moment in his legendary life, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because believe me, the most thrilling chapters are still to come. We're about to witness the early battles that forged a military genius, and then we'll uncover the secrets of the historic Kurultai, where the fragmented Mongol tribes finally united under one banner. But how did he achieve such unity? Therefore, we'll also explore the Great Yassa, the iron code that became the backbone of an empire, and follow the thundering hooves of the Mongol armies in their first conquests that redrew the maps of power. As we venture through history together, I'd love to know where you're all tuning in from. What time is it where you are right now? Let me know in the comments below. It's amazing to connect with you all. Now, let's return to the steppes and continue to uncover the path to becoming Genghis Khan. Part 1. Wolf Cub of the Steppe. The forging of Temüjin A, the vast and harsh steppe. Before any single man could dream of empire, before a name could echo with the force of conquest across continents, the world itself had to be a crucible, a relentless shaper of destinies. Picture, then, the Mongolia of the 12th century, a realm that offered no quarter to the frail, no solace to the unprepared. This was the immense Eurasian steppe, a majestic, windswept plateau thrusting itself skyward, 1,000 to 2,000 meters above the distant, unseen sea. It was a land of giants, caught between them, with no gentle coastline to soften its edges, no easy passage to the vast waters beyond. Here, the very air vibrated with an untamed spirit, and the climate, a master of extremes, knew no concept of gentle moderation. Winters were not merely cold, they were an epoch of brutal, unyielding frost, a long, dark siege where temperatures would plummet to a bone, chilling 30 degrees below zero. A cold so profound it could freeze the marrow in one's bones and extinguish the faintest flicker of hope. Rivers turned to solid ice, pathways for wolves and desperate men, and the very earth seemed to hold its breath, waiting. The wind, a constant, howling companion, scarred the plains, driving snow into impenetrable drifts and making even the simplest task a monumental effort. Survival was a daily battle against an indifferent, often hostile, universe. Then, with a sudden, almost violent urgency, summer would erupt. It was a fleeting, incandescent season, a brief, torrid affair that scorched the land with an equally ferocious 30 degrees above zero. The sun beat down mercilessly, cracking the parched earth, and the vast, open plains offered little refuge from its relentless glare. Dust devils danced across the horizon, mirages shimmered in the heat haze, and the threat of drought was ever present. Rain, that most coveted of blessings, was a parsimonious visitor, gracing the land only during these truncated summer months. Its arrival was often heralded by dramatic thunderstorms that swept across the plains, the downpour brief but life-giving, just enough to awaken the dormant seeds and sustain the endless, rolling carpets of grass that defined the landscape. These grasslands, a sea of green and gold, were punctuated by the stark silhouettes of rugged mountain ranges, their peaks often snow-capped even in warmer months, their slopes offering temporary respite and hidden springs. Sparse, hardy forests of larch and birch clung to sheltered valleys and north-facing slopes, providing timber and game. To the south, an even more formidable sentinel stood guard the Gobi Desert, a vast expanse of sand, gravel, and rock, its desolate beauty a constant reminder of nature's unforgiving power, a barrier that shaped migrations and tested the limits of endurance. It was this very environment, this theater of unceasing challenge, that had, over millennia, sculpted a people of almost preternatural endurance. The men and women who called this land home possessed a miraculous adaptability, a resilience etched into their very being, and survival skills honed not by teaching, but by the relentless, daily demands of existence until they became pure, unthinking instinct. Life itself was a constant negotiation with the elements, a testament to human tenacity. They learned to read the subtle signs of the changing seasons, to find water where none seemed to exist, to track game across vast distances, and to protect their precious herds from predators and the even greater threat of a sudden, devastating blizzard, the Zud, which could wipe out entire flocks in a matter of days. The rhythm of existence for the disparate Mongol and Turkic tribes before the 13th century was a nomadic symphony, its tempo and melody dictated by their profound, almost sacred, dependence on the Tavan Koshu Mal, the five muzzles, the five kinds of indispensable livestock, the horse, swift and enduring, the very soul of their mobility and a critical component of their military might, the sheep, provider of wool for felt and clothing, skin for containers, meat for sustenance, and milk for cheese and yogurt, the goat, hardy and resourceful, thriving on sparse vegetation where other animals might falter, also a source of meat, milk, and cashmere, the stoic cattle, including the shaggy, powerful yak adapted to high altitudes, sources of rich milk, tough meat, and draft power for pulling carts, and the Bactrian camel, master of the arid Gobi, a lifeline across the desert, capable of carrying heavy loads and surviving for extended periods without water. These animals were not merely possessions. They were extensions of the family, the currency of wealth, the guarantors of life. They provided the very fabric of existence, meat to quell hunger, rich milk that could be transformed into a dozen nourishing forms, yogurt, cheese, rags fermented mare's milk wool, and hides for clothing that could withstand the bitterest cold, felt for the iconic jur, or yurt, their circular, domed dwellings. Ingeniously designed for warmth in winter and coolness in summer, easily dismantled and transported on ox, carts or camels, a perfect adaptation to their wandering lives. And, of course, the horse, above all, was the essential means of transport, the legs of their society, the instrument of both hunt and war, ridden from a young age with a skill that astounded outsiders. Their lives were a perpetual migration, a dance dictated by the changing seasons, by the ancient, unspoken wisdom passed down through generations that knew where the richest pastures lay, where the life-giving springs would flow when others ran dry. They followed the grass, moving their herds from summer uplands, where the air was cooler and the grazing abundant, to sheltered winter valleys, protected from the worst of the winds and snows. This was not a haphazard wandering, but a carefully planned, cyclical journey etched into the land and into their collective memory, a testament to their deep understanding of their environment. And it wasn't just about survival, it was a way of life that bred specific virtues: foresight, resourcefulness, and an unshakable communal spirit. The large-scale communal hunts, the Nerj, where hundreds, sometimes thousands, of horsemen would form vast encircling cordons, miles in diameter, to drive game, wild asses, gazelles, wolves into a central killing ground, were far more than a means of supplementing their diet. These were grand, strategic exercises, dress rehearsals for war, instilling discipline, fostering intricate coordination among disparate groups, and owning the tactical acumen of every participating warrior. The Nerj taught them to think as one, to anticipate the movements of both quarry and fellow hunter, to maneuver with speed and precision across difficult terrain, skills that would later prove devastating on the battlefield. Material life, by the standards of settled civilizations, might have appeared starkly simple, almost Spartan. But this simplicity belied a profound ingenuity, a remarkable ability to extract the maximum utility from the limited resources the steppe deigned to offer, a deep understanding of their environment born from generations of co-existence. Every part of a slaughtered animal was used, nothing was wasted. But any semblance of tranquility on these vast plains was an illusion, as fragile as a summer frost, as fleeting as the morning mist. Mongol society before the rise of Temüjin was a seething, fragmented mosaic, a chaotic tapestry woven from the threads of countless distinct Mongol and Turkic tribes. Names like the powerful Karait, who had adopted Nestorian Christianity, and possessed a degree of settled sophistication. The Naiman to the west, also influenced by settled cultures and possessing a written script. The vengeful Merkit, known for their ferocity and long-standing feuds, and the perpetually troublesome Tatar, whose proximity to the Jin dynasty often made them instruments of foreign policy, resonated with the clang of steel and the cries of raided encampments. These groups, and many others like the Taechiud, the Jadaran, the Ongjarat, were locked in a relentless, often brutal, struggle for dominance, for grazing lands rich in life, sustaining grass, for access to scarce water rights, for livestock, the very measure of wealth and power, and for the human spoils of war, particularly women, whose capture was both a blow to the enemy's prestige and a means of increasing the captor's lineage. The Obog, the patrilineal clan, tracing descent from a common ancestor, formed the fundamental social unit, a collection of families bound by blood, shared custom, and mutual obligation. Several Obogs would coalesce to form an Amag, a tribe, or a larger, often temporary, tribal confederation, their loyalties shifting with the winds of fortune and the charisma, or ruthlessness, of their leaders. And on a grander scale still, there was the concept of the Ulis, a term that could signify a people, a nascent nation, or the territorial domain controlled by a powerful Khan, whose authority was often personal and directly tied to his ability to provide for and protect his followers. At the apex of this volatile structure stood the Khans, the hereditary chieftains, and the Noyans, the influential nobles and military commanders whose authority often rested as much on personal prowess, demonstrated bravery, and the loyalty of their warriors Davan-Kurs as on lineage. Below them was the esteemed warrior class, the Bahadurs, the braves, whose skill in horsemanship and archery was legendary from childhood, and upon whose strength the survival and prosperity of the clan depended. At the base were the Arat, the common nomadic herders, the backbone of the pastoral economy, whose lives were a constant toil, but who also formed the pool from which warriors were drawn. Inter-tribal warfare was not an aberration, it was the norm, a grim, cyclical pattern of raid and counter. Raid, often sparked by disputes over resources, insults to honor, or the ancient imperative of blood feuds that could span generations. The objectives were starkly pragmatic: to plunder livestock, to capture women and children who could be incorporated into the tribe or sold as slaves, and to expand or defend precious grazing territories vital for the survival of their herds. Alliances, when they were formed, were often marriages of convenience, sealed by the exchange of daughters, inherently unstable, prone to fracture at the first sign of shifting power dynamics, a perceived slight, or a more tempting offer from a rival. Therefore, loyalty was a precious, and often scarce, commodity. It was precisely this pervasive fragmentation, this unceasing internal strife, this maelstrom of conflicting ambitions and ancient enmities, that had created a gaping power vacuum across the Mongolian plateau. The land itself seemed to cry out for a unifying force, a leader of singular vision and indomitable will, capable of forging a nation from these disparate, warring factions. The stage was set, the conditions ripe, for an exceptional individual to emerge and impose order upon the chaos, to channel the fierce, untamed energy of the steppe peoples towards a common purpose. Amidst this world of raw survival and shifting loyalties, the ancient Mongols held deep spiritual beliefs, primarily rooted in shamanism, or Byo, and the veneration of Tengri. Kauka Monmink Tengri, the eternal blue sky, was the supreme, all-powerful deity, the ultimate arbiter of fate, whose will manifested in the forces of nature: the thunder, the lightning, the wind, the sun. Alongside Tengri, they revered Eat-Gen-Eek, Mother Earth, the benevolent provider who nurtured all life, from the grasses that fed their herds to the game they hunted. The shamans, known as Buddhas mailed or Udgans female, served as vital intermediaries between the human world and the spirit realm, which was populated by a host of nature spirits, ancestral ghosts, and other supernatural entities. They were healers, diviners, and spiritual guides, entering ecstatic trances, often aided by drumming and chanting, to commune with these spirits. They conducted elaborate rituals to cure illness, to predict the future, especially the outcome of hunts or battles, to solicit protection from benevolent spirits, and to appease those that were malevolent or offended. Their ceremonies were intimately connected to the natural world, to the cycles of the seasons, the life cycles of their herds, and the pivotal events of nomadic existence: the hunt, childbirth, alliances, and, of course, war. The profound belief in the power of Tengri and the sanctity of nature was not a mere superstition. It was woven into the very fabric of their consciousness, profoundly influencing their worldview and shaping their most critical political and military decisions. The concept of a mandate from heaven, a divine anointment to rule, was deeply embedded, and it would later play a crucial role in legitimizing conquest and unifying disparate peoples under a single banner. Though their lives were predominantly nomadic, a self-contained pastoral existence lived out on the vast, open range, they were not entirely cut off from the wider world. Tentative, often fraught, trade relationships existed with the great sedentary, agricultural civilizations that lay to their south and east, cultures whose wealth and complexity stood in stark contrast to their own. The Jurchen Jin dynasty, ruling over northern China with its bustling cities and sophisticated bureaucracy, and the Tangut Kingdom of Western Xia, controlling vital oases and trade routes along the eastern stretches of the Silk Road, were both tantalizingly wealthy and at times accessible. The Mongols, masters of animal husbandry, would exchange the products of their herds: horses, furs, hides, felt, and the spoils of the hunt for essential goods they could not produce themselves: grain as millet, wheat to supplement their meat and dairy diet, particularly during lean winter months, metal for weapons, tools, and ornaments, textiles, especially silk, prized for its lightness and warmth, tea, and other luxury items that found their way onto the steppe. But these interactions were by no means always peaceful or based on equitable exchange. The line between trade and raid was often perilously thin, blurred by opportunity and necessity, driven by the harsh realities of steppe life, by a desire for goods they could not otherwise obtain, or simply by the inherent martial traditions and warrior ethos of certain clans. Incursions into the territories of these settled states were a frequent, almost seasonal, occurrence. These raids, though often small-scale hit and run affairs, served multiple purposes. They provided valuable plunder that could significantly enhance a chieftain's prestige and resources. They tested the defenses of their more prosperous and seemingly vulnerable neighbors, and they kept their warriors battle-ready, honing their skills in mounted combat and rapid maneuvers. And it was through these early, often violent, encounters, whether through the pragmatic bartering in dusty border markets where mistrust was palpable, or the swift, brutal efficiency of a mounted raid that left devastation in its wake, that the Mongols began to acquire invaluable, first-hand knowledge. They learned of the immense riches that lay beyond the familiar horizons of the steppes, of the sophisticated cultures, the fortified cities that seemed to bristle with defenders, and, crucially, the potential vulnerabilities of these great, seemingly unshakable, sedentary civilizations, their reliance on agriculture, their slower, moving infantry armies, and the internal political divisions that could sometimes be exploited. These glimpses of a wider, wealthier world, combined with the inherent ambition and restless energy bred by their harsh environment, began to sow the seeds of larger, more audacious aspirations for the future, dreams that would one day engulf continents. The vast, unforgiving steppe had not only shaped a resilient people, it was also, unknowingly, nurturing the architects of its own transformation and the future conquerors of much of the known world. The raw materials were all there: a hardy people, unparalleled horsemen, a belief in a guiding destiny, and a growing awareness of the riches that lay just beyond their grasp. All that was needed was a hand to forge them into an unstoppable force. The fierce childhood of Temüjin. Against this backdrop of stark beauty, relentless struggle, and simmering tribal animosities, around the year 1162, though the precise date remains a subject of scholarly debate, a child destined to reshape this world was born near the sacred mountain of Birken Kaldun, by the headwaters of the Onan River. He was named Temüjin. He was the firstborn son of Yes J. Batur, a respected, if not paramount, chieftain of the Borjigin clan, a sub-clan of the larger Kied Mongols, and his mother was Hoilun, a woman of the Olkhonid tribe, who Yes Gai had captured from her Merkit, betrothed some years prior, an act that, like many on the steppe, would have far-reaching and bloody consequences. Legend, recorded much later in the secret history of the Mongols, tells that when Temüjin entered the world, his tiny right fist was clenched tightly around a clot of blood the size of a knucklebone. In the shamanistic beliefs of his people, such an omen was potent, interpreted by many as a sign of a future warrior, a leader destined for greatness, perhaps even a future stained with the blood of conquest. His noble lineage, while not placing him at the pinnacle of Mongol power at the time, certainly afforded him a degree of status and expectation, a foundation upon which a future could be built or from which one could tragically fall. But whatever auspicious signs may have attended his birth, fate, in its cruel and capricious way, soon dealt a devastating blow that would shatter young Temüjin's world and set him on a path of unimaginable hardship. When Temüjin was merely 9 years old, a pivotal age marking the transition from early childhood, his father, Yessi embarked on a journey. He was escorting his young son to the tribe of Decisive of the Ongjurat to arrange a betrothal for Temüjin with Decisive's daughter, Bu-ri, a girl a year his senior. This was a common practice, cementing alliances and securing future stability. Having left Temüjin with his future in-laws, Yessi began his journey home. On the way, he encountered a group of Tatars, traditional enemies of his people, who were feasting. Unaware of their identity, or, perhaps, naively accepting their customary offer of hospitality, Yessi shared their meal. The Tatars, however, recognized him as the man who had, years before, been involved in conflicts that led to the death of some of their kinsmen. They secretly poisoned his food. Yessi, realizing too late what had happened, managed to struggle back towards his own encampment, but the poison was potent. He died shortly after, leaving his young family vulnerable and his small clan in disarray. The sudden death of a strong leader like Yessi was a catastrophe. It ripped apart the fragile bonds that held his followers together and plunged the Kiad clan into chaos and uncertainty. And then, as was the brutal but pragmatic custom of the steppe, where strength and the ability to provide were paramount, the Temüjin tribe, kinsmen who had previously been part of Yessi's following, made a cold calculation. Led by Targudai Kurultai, they callously abandoned Hoailun and her young children, Temüjin, his 3 younger brothers Kasar, Kajian, and Temji, his sister Temlen, and Yesge's 2 sons by another wife, Bektar and Belgute. The Temüjids reasoned that Hoailun's brood was too young, too weak to lead, and they were unwilling to share their scarce resources, their herds, their hunting grounds, with a widow and her fatherless offspring. The family was left to fend for themselves, ostracized, stripped of their followers and their livestock, cast adrift in the vast, unforgiving wilderness. This act of betrayal by their own kin was a bitter lesson in the harsh realities of steppe politics. Temüjin's family was plunged into dire poverty, a stark contrast to their previous status. The ensuing years were a relentless struggle for survival. Hoailun, a woman of incredible fortitude, taught her children to live off the land. They hunted marmots and other small rodents, fished in the rivers, and foraged for wild roots, berries, and bird eggs to stave off starvation. Temüjin, as the eldest son of Hoailun, felt the weight of responsibility acutely. These years of extreme hardship, of constant hunger and lurking danger, did not break him. Instead, they forged within him an unyielding will to survive, a fierce determination, and a profound understanding of the precariousness of life. He learned to be resourceful, observant, and patient, qualities that would serve him well in the years to come. Within this crucible of deprivation, however, new tensions arose, even within the beleaguered family unit. Food was scarce, and disputes over its distribution were inevitable. Temüjin, driven by a burgeoning sense of leadership and perhaps a simmering resentment, clashed with his older half, brother, Bektar, over hunting spoils. Bektar, being older and physically stronger, often took the lion's share. The secret history recounts one incident where Bektar snatched a fish Temüjin had caught. The simmering resentment boiled over. In a cold, calculated act that shocked even his own mother, Temüjin, then perhaps around 14, conspired with his younger full brother Kasar, a skilled archer. They stalked Bektar and, from ambush, shot him dead with arrows. Hoailun was furious, berating her sons for their fratricidal act, particularly for killing a kinsman at a time when they needed every able body and unity above all. But this brutal incident, while morally reprehensible, revealed a chillingly decisive and ruthless aspect of Temüjin's developing character. It demonstrated a willingness to eliminate any perceived rival or obstacle to his own authority, even within his own family, a trait that would mark his later rise to power. He was learning, in the harshest possible way, that on the steppe, power was not given, it had to be taken, and often defended with lethal force. Not long after this grim episode, Temüjin's tribulations intensified. He was captured by the very Temüjids who had abandoned his family, likely because they saw the maturing youth as a potential future threat, a claimant to his father's legacy who might one day seek revenge or rally followers. He was subjected to the humiliation of being paraded with a kang, a heavy wooden collar, around his neck, a public display of his powerlessness, treated like a common slave. He was forced to endure the taunts and abuse of his captors. But even in this desperate plight, chained and seemingly broken, Temüjin's spirit remained unquenched. His mind, sharpened by adversity, was constantly searching for an opportunity. One evening, during a feast when his guards were drunk and distracted, he managed to strike his sentry with the edge of the kang and fled into the night, the heavy wooden yoke still around his neck. He hid in the dense reeds by the Onan River. When the Temüjids organized a search party, a man named Sorgan Shira, a commoner from the Soldis clan who was part of the search, discovered Temüjin's hiding place. Instead of betraying him, Sorgan Shira, perhaps out of pity for the young nobleman's plight, or perhaps discerning a spark of future greatness, helped him. He told Temüjin to remain hidden, misdirected the other searchers, and later, under the cover of darkness, returned to free him from the kang and provide him with sustenance and a horse. This act of unexpected kindness from a stranger in a world defined by betrayal must have left a profound impression on Temüjin. His daring escape, aided by an unlikely ally, not only saved his life but also reinforced the crucial lessons of vigilance, courage, and the profound value of loyalty, even from unexpected quarters. He had stared death in the face and survived, emerging stronger and more determined than ever. Free once more, but still an outcast with few resources, Temüjin, now a young man, sought out Barati, the girl to whom his father had betrothed him years before. He found her family, and despite his fallen fortunes, decisive honored the old agreement. The marriage to Kurultai, a woman who would remain his principal wife and a source of steadfast support throughout his life, was more than just a personal union. It was a crucial step in rebuilding his life and forging new alliances. Barati came with a valuable dowry, the most significant item of which was a luxurious coat of black sable fur. Temüjin, displaying an astuteness that belied his youth and a keen understanding of steppe diplomacy, did not keep this treasure for himself. Instead, he decided to use it as a strategic gift. He journeyed with his younger brother Belgutai to the encampment of Togrul Khan, the powerful ruler of the Karate tribe. Togrul had been an Anda, a sworn brother, to Temüjin's father, Yesji. Presenting the sable coat as a magnificent offering, Temüjin invoked this past relationship, reminding Togrul of his bond with Yesji and appealing for his protection and patronage. Togrul, perhaps moved by the memory of his old friend, or perhaps recognizing the potential in this determined young man, accepted the gift and, more importantly, agreed to take Temüjin under his wing. This was a masterstroke. The alliance with the mighty Great Khan provided Temüjin with a powerful protector and a crucial platform from which to begin his ascent. But the relentless cycle of steppe violence and retribution was far from over. Soon after his marriage, a new crisis erupted, one that would test Temüjin's courage and leadership to the limit. The Merkit tribe, still nursing the old grudge over Yesji's abduction of Huailun decades earlier, launched a surprise raid on Temüjin's small encampment. In the chaos, Barati was captured. This was a devastating blow, a deep personal humiliation, and a direct challenge to Temüjin's honor. For Temüjin, this was not just the loss of a wife, it was a public declaration of his weakness. He could not let this stand. Faced with this dire challenge, Temüjin did not despair. He acted swiftly and decisively. He appealed to his new patron, Togrul Khan, for assistance. He also sought out Jamuka, a childhood friend from the Jataran tribe with whom he had sworn an oath of Anda brotherhood. Jamuka, already a rising leader in his own right, agreed to help. The tripartite alliance, Temüjin's small band of followers, Togrul Khan's formidable Karate warriors, and Jamuka's Jataran forces launched a combined military campaign against the Merkits. After a fierce battle, the Merkits were routed, and Bharat was successfully rescued. This victory was a watershed moment for Temüjin. It was far more than just the recovery of his wife. It was his first significant military triumph as a leader in his own right. It demonstrated his ability to forge alliances, to inspire loyalty, and to command men in battle. His prestige soared. Warriors, drawn by his courage and success, began to flock to his banner. The rescue of Bharat officially marked Temüjin's dramatic emergence onto the turbulent political and military stage of the Mongolian steppes, no longer as a hunted outcast, but as a young, charismatic, and formidable leader, a wolf cub who had survived the harshest trials of the wilderness and was now ready, with fangs sharpened and senses honed, to embark on the greater hunts that lay ahead, the hunts that would eventually lead to the creation of an empire. The unforgiving steppe had done its work. It had forged a conqueror. ACT Unificatanium OFT Economata Uplias 1190s 1206 Part 2. The unification of the nomadic peoples 1190s 1206a. The rise of a Khan forging alliances and defeating rebels. After the triumphant rescue of Bharat, Temüjin's fame began to spread across the steppes like a newly kindled wildfire. Courageous warriors, clans weary of the endless chaos, started to look towards this young chieftain with a burgeoning sense of hope. His forces swelled. The number of loyal Enkur's companions in arms willing to fight under his banner grew daily. But the rise of any new power on the steppe inevitably unsettled old orders, stirred up jealousies, and fractured relationships once thought unbreakable. The sacred bond between Temüjin and Jamuka, his cherished childhood friend and crucial ally in the victory over the Merkits, was not immune to this harsh law. The rift between the two men was not merely a matter of personal clashes. It stemmed from an ever-deepening divergence in their philosophies of leadership and their soaring ambitions. Jamuka, a scion of a noble lineage from the Jataran tribe, tended to uphold the traditional power structure, where lineage and the established tribal aristocracy played the decisive role. He believed in a preordained order, where each man had his place according to his birth. Conversely, Temüjin, who had tasted the bitter dregs of betrayal and abandonment, harbored a more revolutionary ideology. He advocated for building his forces based on merit and absolute loyalty, irrespective of whether one was highborn or a commoner. To him, a brave and loyal herdsman was worth more than a cowardly and duplicitous noble. This was a progressive, almost heretical, idea on the Mongolian steppe at that time. This fundamental difference, coupled with the fact that both were charismatic leaders commanding their own formidable armies and nursing no small ambitions, made a confrontation between them an unavoidable tragedy, a preordained clash. The flames of childhood friendship gradually flickered and died, replaced by suspicion and power calculations. The steppe, it seemed, was not vast enough for two such tigers. And so, the conquests began, wars aimed at eliminating rivals and consolidating power, each campaign a calculated move in Temüjin's grand strategy to unify Mongolia. First among them were the Tatars. This was a feud that ran deep in Temüjin's veins. It was the Tatar tribe that had poisoned his father, Yesjai, sowing tragedy in his family from his earliest years. This was not merely a war for territory or resources. It was a profoundly personal vendetta, a blood debt that had to be repaid. With the assistance of his ally Togrul Khan and the Karit tribe, Temüjin launched a devastating campaign against the Tatars. The battles were fierce, but ultimately, with his commanding skill and unwavering determination, Temüjin secured a decisive victory. And then, he issued a chilling decree, an act of bloody vengeance that remains controversial. All Tatar men taller than a cart's linchpin were to be executed. This act, however brutal, was not solely to avenge his father. It was a clear message to other rivals. Opposition would come at a terrible price. It also aimed to completely eradicate the potential threat from a traditional enemy, allowing them no chance to recover. Meanwhile, Jamuka, clearly perceiving the growing threat from his former friend, did not remain idle. He swiftly assembled a formidable coalition of tribes hostile to Temüjin. In 1201, at a grand assembly, these tribes acclaimed Jamuka as Gurkhan, or universal ruler, an ambitious title, with the clear objective of utterly destroying Temüjin's forces. A direct confrontation between the two friends who had once shared life and death experiences was now inevitable. But Jamuka's coalition, though numerous, lacked internal cohesion. It was more a collection of temporary interests than a unified bloc built on steadfast loyalty. Furthermore, Jamuka's past cruelties, particularly after the Battle of Dallin Balzot, the first major clash between the two, around 1187, Lenin 9, where he had 70 captives boiled alive in cauldrons, had instilled fear and distrust in many. That cruelty, while perhaps intended to deter, became a weakness, allowing Temüjin, who proved more astute in winning hearts and minds, to attract more supporters. Therefore, when the two mighty armies clashed, Jamuka's coalition was decisively defeated by Temüjin with the support of Togrul Khan. After Jamuka's defeat, the alliance between Temüjin and Togrul Khan of the Karit tribe, which had already shown subtle cracks, began to strain noticeably. Togrul Khan, also known as Wang Khan, had been an important patron to Temüjin. But his son Sengam harbored a deep jealousy towards the talent and growing influence of his father's adopted son. Sengam feared that his aging father might favor the brilliant Temüjin as successor to the Karit Khanate over him, the legitimate heir. Sengam repeatedly sowed seeds of doubt and calumny, arousing Togrul Khan's suspicions against Temüjin. The tension finally reached its peak when Togrul Khan, perhaps influenced by Sengam, curtly rejected Temüjin's proposal of marriage between his eldest son Jachi and a Karit princess. In Mongol culture, such a refusal, especially from someone of Temüjin's stature, was considered a grave insult, an intolerable humiliation. The last straw had been drawn. The unavoidable war erupted between the two once close allies. Initially, Temüjin's forces faced considerable difficulties against the powerful and battle-hardened Karit army. There were moments when defeat seemed imminent, but with his innate military genius, his ability to turn adverse situations around, and the loyalty of his corps commanders, Temüjin eventually regrouped his forces, counter-attacked, and completely defeated the Karit army in a decisive battle in 1203. Togrul Khan, fleeing in desperation, was killed by a Naiman patrol that did not recognize him. Sengam also met a tragic end. The once mighty Karit tribe, formerly a formidable power on the steppe, was broken and its remnants fully absorbed into Temüjin's ever-growing forces. This was another crucial step on the path to unifying Mongolia. With the Karit destroyed, only the Naiman tribe to the west remained as the last major rival blocking Temüjin's path to dominion over the steppe. Jamuka, after his successive defeats, had also sought refuge with Tayan Khan, the powerful ruler of the Naiman. Jamuka's presence among the Naiman made the confrontation between Temüjin and Tayan Khan all but inevitable. In 1204, Temüjin decided to commit his full strength against the Naiman. The Naiman army, though numerous and possessing the advantage of familiar terrain, proved complacent and ill-prepared. Temüjin, his military talents honed through countless battles, employed brilliant tactics. One of these was an effective psychological ploy. He ordered each of his soldiers to light multiple campfires at night, creating the illusion that his army was many times larger than it actually was, sowing panic and weakening the Naiman's will to fight. In the decisive battle in the Altai Mountains, the Naiman army was routed. Tayan Khan was killed in action. Jamuka's fate also reached its tragic conclusion. After the Naiman defeat, he was captured by his own subordinates and delivered to Temüjin, perhaps in the hope of clemency. Temüjin, seeing his old friend, his sworn brother of yore, now fallen and disgraced, offered to renew their friendship, to forgive past transgressions. But Jamuka, with the pride of a nobleman and a Khan, refused. He said that just as there could not be two suns in the sky, there could not be two Khans on the steppe. He asked for a noble death according to Mongol custom, that is, to die without a his blood being shed, usually by having his back broken. Temüjin, though perhaps with a heart heavy with complex emotions, granted this request. Jamuka's death closed a turbulent chapter in Temüjin's life, while also eliminating a final potential rival. Temüjin's path to unifying Mongolia was not merely a string of military victories. It was a masterful combination of many elements, exceptional military talent, demonstrated through flexible tactics, an ability to seize opportunities, and to exploit enemy weaknesses, the capacity to build and maintain strategic alliances, even if sometimes temporary and readily broken, when necessary, the effective application of psychological warfare to demoralize opponents before battle, and, Most importantly, a revolutionary policy to dismantle the old tribal loyalties, the very root of disunity, and to forge a new, absolute loyalty directed towards himself and a future unified Mongol state. He did not hesitate to use brutal force, even massacre, to eliminate unyielding enemies, those forces that resisted to the end. But he was also ready to show clemency, to employ talented individuals from defeated tribes if they submitted and swore allegiance. This policy not only helped him rapidly expand his forces, but also weakened his rivals from within, as many realized that submission to Temüjin might offer a more stable future than continued futile warfare. Temüjin's rise, therefore, was not just the result of battlefield triumphs. It was the outcome of an incredibly complex political and military struggle, where personal talent, strategic acumen, and an extraordinary ability to adapt played decisive roles. His willingness to break the bond with Jamukha, a profound symbol of personal loyalty in Mongol culture, demonstrated his absolute prioritization of the goal of unification and supreme power. This decision, however personally painful, likely strengthened his resolve to build a new order, where loyalty was owed to a centralized Mongol state led by him, rather than to the fluid and often treacherous tribal or personal relationships of the past. Temüjin's policy towards defeated tribes also marked a significant departure from the traditional practices of tribal warfare. Instead of simply plundering assets and annihilating enemies, he frequently incorporated defeated warriors into his own army, then deliberately dispersed them among new military units organized decimally, thereby breaking down old tribal structures and fostering loyalty directly to himself and the unified Mongol army. This not only rapidly and effectively augmented his military strength, but was also a crucial strategic step in forging a unified Mongol identity, transcending the tribal divisions and feuds that had persisted for centuries. The fires of disunity on the steppe were slowly being extinguished, giving way to a new dawn. The Kurultai of 1206, the birth of an empire. After defeating or subjugating all major rival tribes on the vast steppe, after the blood had ceased to flow and victorious banners had been raised everywhere, Temüjin recognized that the momentous hour had arrived. In the spring of 1206, a spring pregnant with hope and renewal, he convened a great assembly, a solemn and sacred Kurultai, at the headwaters of the Onan River, the very place of his birth, considered the sacred origin of his clan. This was not merely a routine gathering, it was an event of historic magnitude, a fateful turning point, bringing together the chieftains, the khans, the noyans of all the Mongol and Turkic tribes who had submitted, along with his brilliant military commanders and their families. A veritable forest of white felt yurts was erected, stretching as far as the eye could see, symbolizing the unity and strength of a unified Mongol nation newly forged from the blood and fire of war. An atmosphere of solemnity and exhilaration pervaded the assembly. In this momentous event, a key figure in legitimizing and sanctifying Temüjin's supreme power was a renowned and highly influential shaman named Koko who was also known by the honorific Tebtengri, meaning communicator with heaven, or most heavenly. In the presence of the entire great assembly, Tebtengri solemnly performed ancient rituals and then, in a voice resonant with authority, declared that Temüjin was the one chosen by Kare Kamelzo Mink Tengri, eternal blue sky, to rule over all the nomadic peoples of the steppe. This proclamation, coming from the most revered shaman, carried immense sacred significance. It linked Temüjin's power to the mandate of heaven, a concept of profound and widespread influence in the spiritual life of the Mongols, an endorsement from the supreme deity that none would dare question or oppose. According to some accounts of later Mongol enthronement ceremonies, one can imagine Temüjin being ceremoniously raised aloft on a large white felt carpet, a symbol of purity, a new beginning, and the reverence of the entire populace. Subsequently, the chieftains of the tribes and the attending delegates would have, one by one, performed the kowtow, prostrating themselves 9 times before their new Great Khan, a gesture signifying absolute reverence, unconditional submission, and unwavering loyalty. These ancient and solemn rituals were not merely symbolic, they aimed to firmly consolidate the supreme authority and absolute legitimacy of the new leader, the man who had ended centuries of division. It was at this historic Kurultai that Temüjin was formally acclaimed by all the Mongol tribes with a new title, a title that would resonate throughout the world and enter the annals of human history. Genghis Khan Sil or Chinggis Khan. The precise meaning of this title remains a subject of scholarly debate to this day. It might mean oceanic ruler, alluding to a dominion as vast and powerful as the sea. It could also signify universal ruler or strong, resolute ruler. But whatever its exact meaning, this new title unequivocally affirmed his supreme status, elevating him above all previous tribal leaders, and symbolized the birth of a new political entity, a unified, powerful, and ambitious Mongol nation. The name Temüjin now belonged to the past. Genghis Khan of the present and future had emerged. Following the enthronement came the oaths of allegiance. The tribal chieftains and military commanders, those who had shared life and death with him, stepped forward one by one, solemnly swearing unconditional loyalty to Genghis Khan. They pledged to obey his every command, to fight selflessly under his banner, and to consider his enemies their own. These oaths, made in the presence of the entire Great Assembly and under the sacred name of Tengri, carried an immense binding power in Mongol society, where personal honor and a sworn promise were valued above life itself. The Kurultai of 1206, therefore, was not merely a lavish coronation ceremony or an ordinary political event. It was a monumental historical milestone marking the official birth of the Mongol Empire. It brought an end to long centuries of division, conflict, and enmity among the Mongol tribes. Supreme power was now fully concentrated in the hands of Genghis Khan. A unified Mongol nation, with a formidable army and an iron will, had been established. And, most importantly, the ideological foundation for future campaigns of imperial expansion across the world under the banner of fulfilling the mandate of heaven had been firmly laid. The Kurultai of 1206 was an elaborately staged event, a drama of power that perfectly blended political and spiritual elements to consolidate Genghis Khan's absolute authority. The participation of numerous tribal leaders, though some may still have harbored private doubts or calculations, demonstrated a political consensus, at least on the surface. The role of shamans like Teb Tengri provided divine sanction, an extremely important factor in a society deeply influenced by Tengrism. Rituals such as possibly being raised on a white felt carpet and the chieftain's 9 prostrations were not just symbolic, they served to reinforce the new social order, affirming the Great Khan's unchallengeable supreme status. The bestowing upon Genghis Khan of a new, majestic title with universal connotations was also a way to erase the divisive past and direct the entire Mongol nation towards a future of unified imperial glory. Most significantly, the Kurultai of 1206 successfully transformed the internal conflict energy, which had weakened the Mongol tribes for centuries, into a colossal military and spiritual force directed outwards, with a heaven-sent mission to conquer and rule the world. This was indeed an ideological turning point, setting the stage for the subsequent world-shaking great conquests. The wind from the steppe had begun to gather its strength, ready to erupt into a storm. See the pillars of the new order. After being elevated as Great Khan, Genghis Khan understood that unifying the tribes by force was only the first step. To sustain a nascent empire and prepare for greater conquests, he needed to build solid foundations for a new order. An empire could not stand on swords and personal loyalty alone. It required laws, an organized and disciplined army, an effective administrative apparatus, and the ability to communicate swiftly. Therefore, he set about establishing these crucial pillars. First and perhaps most importantly was the promulgation of the Great Yassa, Ikesasag. Although a complete, codified law from 1206 remains a subject of historical debate, there is no doubt that Genghis Khan established a system of laws, regulations, and edicts, initially perhaps largely oral, based on ancient Mongol customs, but adapted and supplemented for the new situation, and later gradually written down. The compilation and supervision of the Yassa's enforcement were entrusted to his closest and most capable confidants, such as Shiji Kutuku, his wise adopted brother, who was appointed great judge, and Chagatai, his second son, known for his stern character and understanding of law. A notable feature of the Yassa was that it seems to have been kept relatively secret from the common populace. Only the nobility and high-ranking officials were fully privy to its provisions. This may have allowed the Great Khan and his successors a certain flexibility in applying and adapting the law to specific circumstances without diminishing its sanctity. The provisions of the Yassa covered almost every aspect of Mongol life, from military to social, from family to religion and commerce. Regarding military discipline, the Yassa laid down extremely strict, arguably brutal, regulations. Any act of desertion, disobedience to a superior officer, or even a soldier failing to pick up items dropped by a comrade ahead of him on the march could be met with severe punishment, often death. This iron discipline was one of the key factors contributing to the extraordinary fighting strength and cohesion of the Mongol army. For social order, the Yassa strictly forbade acts causing instability such as theft, especially of livestock, a common cause of pre-unification tribal conflicts, adultery, deliberate harmful lying, betrayal of allies, and disrespect towards elders. The law also required people to share food and drink with travelers, an important tradition of nomadic hospitality. For family law, the Yassa had specific regulations concerning marriage and family. For example, it regulated bride price, forbade marriage between close blood relatives, and permitted polygamy, which was common in Mongol society. Children born to secondary wives, or even slave women, were considered legitimate and had certain inheritance rights, although priority usually went to the sons of the principal wife. Mongol women, especially those of noble status, played a definite role in managing family property and even engaged in trade when their husbands were away. Notably, the Yassa is said to have forbidden the selling of women as commodities, a significant step forward compared to many contemporary societies. One of the most striking and progressive provisions of the Yassa, which surprised many observers from other civilizations, was the regulation on religious freedom. Genghis Khan declared that all religions were to be respected, and that there should be no preference or discrimination towards any particular faith. Clergy, monks, physicians, and spiritual persons of various religions, such as Buddhism, Islam, Nestorian Christianity, Taoism, were exempted from public duties and all forms of taxation. This policy not only demonstrated remarkable tolerance for a conqueror, but was also an incredibly shrewd political measure, aimed at ensuring stability and winning the hearts of people in an increasingly expanding empire encompassing diverse peoples and beliefs. Regarding trade and property, the Yassa contained provisions protecting merchants and trade routes, helping to lay the foundation for the safety and prosperity of the Silk Road under the later Pax Mongolica. The law strictly prohibited theft and fraud in commerce. There were also specific regulations concerning hunting, such as prohibiting the hunting of certain animal species during their breeding seasons, to ensure the sustainability of this vital natural resource. The Yassa was enforced rigorously, without exception, with many offenses carrying the ultimate penalty of death. Adjudication was carried out by appointed judges and officials, and the central tenet of the entire legal system was absolute obedience to the will and commands of the Great Khan. Concurrently with the promulgation of laws, Genghis Khan undertook a profound and revolutionary reorganization of the army. He formalized and widely applied the decimal system of military organization, a system that may have existed in nascent forms before but which he perfected and implemented throughout the entire army. The army was divided into units of 10 as Arvan, 100 as Zot, 1,000 Mingan, and 10,000 Tumand. More importantly, enlistment into these units was deliberately done to break down old tribal structures. Warriors from different, even formerly hostile, tribes were now placed in the same unit, fighting side by side, and their loyalty gradually shifted from their old tribal chieftains to their new unit commanders and ultimately to the Great Khan. This system not only enhanced cohesion and iron discipline within the army, but also significantly improved command efficiency, flexibility, and coordination on the battlefield. Regarding command structure, loyal and talented nobles were appointed to command the Tumans and Mingans. Higher-ranking generals Boyans commanded larger corps, Hordu. Crucially, promotion in the Mongol army under Genghis Khan was increasingly based on merit, bravery, and loyalty demonstrated in combat, rather than solely on noble lineage as before. This created a corps of exceptionally talented, dedicated, and absolutely loyal commanders, a key factor in their subsequent military successes. Another pillar of power that Genghis Khan consolidated and expanded was the Keshig, the elite and utterly loyal imperial guard. At the Kurultai of 1206, The keshig was reorganized and its size expanded to 10 zalozen men, a colossal number for a bodyguard unit. The keshig was composed of the sons of high-ranking commanders, nobles from submitted tribes, and the bravest, most loyal warriors personally selected by the Great Khan. This not only ensured the absolute loyalty of the guard, but was also a shrewd way to assimilate the elite of various tribes, making their sons intimately connected to the central court. Later, as the empire expanded, the keshig also recruited talented and loyal individuals from conquered peoples. The role of the keshig extended far beyond mere bodyguard duties. Of course, their primary mission was to protect the absolute safety of the Great Khan and the imperial family. They were divided into units performing day guard, torgud, and night guard, kevchul duties, always on alert and ready for combat. But the keshig also undertook many other important tasks in managing the Great Khan's inner court, supervising servants, preparing food. The kevchul unit was responsible for supervising servants and ensuring food safety, and even crucial administrative functions in the nascent state apparatus. The keshig was the center of Genghis Khan's mobile ruling apparatus, involved in recording decrees, though shigikutuku was the chief judge, planning logistics for the Great Khan's travels and entourage, and managing the daily affairs of the court. The keshig was considered the nucleus of the central administrative body. Furthermore, the keshig was also an important training school where future leaders and military commanders of the empire were groomed and prepared. Members of the keshig enjoyed very high social status, often higher than most army officers of equivalent rank, were well paid, and admission to the keshig was considered a supreme honor, a testament to talent and loyalty. To manage an increasingly vast and complex empire, a writing system was essential. Previously, Mongolian was primarily a spoken language. Genghis Khan recognized the importance of writing for promulgating laws, keeping records, and transmitting orders accurately and efficiently. Around 1204, after defeating the Nayman tribe, the Mongols captured Tata Tonga, a respected Igar scholar who had served as keeper of the seals for Tayang Khan of the Nayman. Instead of executing him, Genghis Khan, with his characteristic foresight, recognized the value of the knowledge Tata Tonga possessed. He tasked Tata Tonga with an important mission to adapt the Uyghur script, which was based on the Sogdian alphabet, to suit the phonetics of the Mongolian language. The result was the creation of the classical Mongol script, Hudum script. The creation of a Mongolian script allowed for the recording of laws, the Yassa, official decrees of the Great Khan, administrative records, and diplomatic correspondence. It facilitated more effective imperial administration over an ever-expanding territory. The script was also used to educate Genghis Khan's sons and other Mongol officials, marking a significant step in the formation of a more formal and organized state apparatus. Finally, to ensure swift and effective communication across the vast territories of the empire, a vital element for maintaining control, coordinating military operations, and administering justice, Genghis Khan established and expanded an incredibly efficient express post system known as the Yams or Radar in Mongolian. This system consisted of a dense network of relay stations strategically placed at intervals of about a day's horse ride, approximately 30-60 kilometers, depending on the terrain. Each station was equipped with fresh horses, provisions, and safe lodging for the Great Khan's official messengers, officials on government business, and later, even licensed merchants. The primary purpose of the YAM system was to ensure the fastest possible transmission of urgent military intelligence, administrative orders from the center to the localities, and intelligence reports from distant regions back to the court. The operation of the YAM stations was entrusted to local officials, possibly darugas, governors, baskakes, tax collectors, or heads of smaller administrative units like tumans, mingyans, jouns. The supply of horses, fodder, food, and manpower for the stations was ensured through compulsory contributions from the local population or from specially designated lands. Security for the stations and the messengers traveling on the YAM system was maintained by the strict regulations of the Yassa and the general order of the empire. Messengers carried paisas, tablets of authority made of precious metal, gold, silver, or wood, inscribed with the Great Khan's decree to prove their authority and receive absolute priority on the road, including access to the best horses and escorts if necessary. The sweeping reforms of Genghis Khan, after the Kurultai of 1206, were not isolated, piecemeal measures. They were an intelligently designed system of pillars intended to support and reinforce each other, aimed at transforming a loose, often warring, tribal confederation into a centralized imperial state, characterized by iron discipline and absolute loyalty to the Great Khan. The Great Yassa provided the legal and moral foundation for unity and discipline. The decimal military system completely shattered old tribal power structures, creating a formidable, mobile, and loyal military force directly answerable to the Great Khan. The Keshig Guard not only protected the Great Khan's safety, but also served as the nucleus of the central administrative apparatus and as a training ground for future leaders, ensuring the loyalty and competence of the ruling class. The adoption and use of the Uyghur script enabled the codification of laws, the keeping of records, and the clear and effective transmission of orders, laying the groundwork for an increasingly organized and sophisticated administration. Finally, the Yam system, like a vast nervous system, ensured rapid and efficient communication across the immense territory, a vital element for maintaining control, coordinating military and administrative activities over a sprawling empire. All these elements together created an unparalleled state and military machine, capable of undertaking large-scale conquests unprecedented in history. Notably, the choice of the Uyghur script, a writing system of a Turkic people from Central Asia, rather than the Chinese script of the powerful Jin dynasty, whom the Mongols were confronting and would soon conquer, can also be seen as a strategic decision, aimed at asserting a distinct imperial identity, one not to be assimilated by the larger cultures they would encounter and rule. These pillars were now firmly in place, and the wind of conquest from the Mongolian steppe was about to blow outwards to the wider world. Part 3. The wind from the steppe blows outwards. The first conquests 1207-1220s A, securing the western flank, the Western Shah. After the banner of unification flew proudly across the Mongolian steppes, after a new order had been established and the war machine had been honed to perfection, Genghis Khan's gaze began to turn outwards. But his first target was not the mightiest empires or the most fertile lands. With keen strategic foresight, he understood that before reaching for greater ambitions, securing his western flank and eliminating potential threats was paramount. And the first entity to fall under his scrutiny was the Tangut Kingdom of Western Xia, a nation situated in northwestern China. Controlling crucial segments of the Silk Road, the motives for the initial campaigns against Western Xia were not merely a thirst for plunder, though that was undoubtedly an attractive factor for a nomadic army always in need of supplies. More importantly, Genghis Khan saw multiple strategic values in Western Xia. He wanted to subjugate this kingdom, to transform it into a vassal state, a stable source of tribute from camels and hunting falcons to find textiles and other valuable goods. Controlling Western Xia's territory also meant seizing vital trade routes, passing through the region, bringing significant economic benefits. And perhaps the most profound long-term goal was to turn Western Xia into a strategic springboard, a secure rear base from which to launch an offensive against the Jurchen Jin dynasty to the east, a traditional and far more powerful adversary. Western Xia, therefore, was an indispensable piece in his grand chessboard of conquest. Before launching a full-scale invasion, the Mongol army, under the direct or indirect command of Genghis Khan, conducted a series of probing raids into Western Xia territory in 1205 and 1207. These attacks, though not yet large in scale, were significant. They were intended to test the enemy's defensive strength, to gather precious intelligence about the terrain, troop numbers, and deployment of the Tangut forces. Simultaneously, they provided opportunities for plunder, weakening the economic potential, and, more importantly, sowing panic and undermining the fighting spirit of the Western Xia military and populace. During one raid in 1205, the Mongols even captured the son of a Western Xia commander. Interestingly, this young man later joined the Mongol army, took the name Shagan, and became one of Genghis Khan's loyal and talented generals, a testament to his policy of attracting talent. By 1209, having firmly consolidated his power in Mongolia and made thorough preparations, Genghis Khan decided to launch a large-scale invasion of Western Xia. The Mongol army, with its battle hardened cavalry and tactics honed through countless engagements, quickly demonstrated its superiority. They easily defeated Western Xia forces on open battlefields, where their mobility and the power of their composite bows were most effective. A significant victory over the Western Xia army, led by Kowloon Hai, and the capture of the city of Wulahai, paved the way for the Mongols to advance deeper into enemy territory. They continued their push along the mighty Yellow River, capturing one fortress after another, spreading terror in their wake. A pivotal battle of the campaign took place at the Kimen Pass, a strategically vital position considered the gateway to the Western Xia capital, Xingqing, modern Yinchuan. Here, the Mongols, with their extensive battlefield experience, employed a familiar yet consistently effective tactic, the feigned retreat. The Western Xia garrison, perhaps due to overconfidence or provocation, fell into the trap, abandoning their strong defensive positions to pursue. And then, once the Western Xia troops had been lured into an unfavorable position, the Mongols suddenly wheeled around, launched a fierce counter-attack, and annihilated a large part of this force. With the Kimen Pass breached, the Mongols advanced directly on the capital, Xingqing, and laid siege to it. This proved to be a major challenge for the Mongol army, which at that time lacked extensive experience in assaulting heavily fortified, well-constructed cities. They attempted a daring but risky plan to divert a branch of the Yellow River to flood the city. But this plan failed disastrously when the dike they constructed broke, and ironically, a part of the Mongol camp itself was flooded. However, despite the failure of their attempt at hydraulic siege warfare, the relentless military pressure exerted by the Mongols, the devastation of the rural areas around the capital which cut off food supplies, and, crucially, the lack of any aid from the Jin dynasty, which was also wary of Mongol power, pushed the Western Xia court into a desperate situation. The Western Xia Emperor Li Anquan Zhangzong was finally forced to submit in early 1210. After surrendering, Western Xia agreed to become a vassal state of the Mongol Empire. They had to fulfill the obligations of a subordinate nation to pay regular tribute of valuable goods such as camels, hunting falcons, and fine textiles, and even to give a princess in marriage to Genghis Khan to cement the relationship. For a period thereafter, Western Xia appeared to be quite compliant, even providing troops to support the Mongols in their large-scale war against the Jin dynasty. It seemed, for a time, that Genghis Khan's initial objective had been achieved. But this vassal relationship, built on fear and imposition, was far from stable. Many years later, when Genghis Khan was preparing for his massive military campaign against the Khwarezmian Empire in Central Asia in 1219, he demanded that Western Xia fulfill its vassal duty by providing troops for the expedition. At this point, the Western Xia court, perhaps feeling that the Mongols were overextended in a distant war, or having its own secret calculations, bluntly refused. Not only that, but they also covertly sought to ally with both the Jin dynasty and the southern Song to jointly oppose the Mongols. This action, in Genghis Khan's eyes, was nothing short of blatant treachery, an unforgivable breach of faith. He was reportedly furious and, according to legend, swore that after dealing with Khwarezm, he would return and utterly destroy the Western Xia kingdom, leaving no trace of it. This fearsome oath would haunt Western Xia and be brutally carried out in the final campaign of his life. The initial campaigns against Western Xia clearly demonstrated the remarkable development in the strategic thinking and military adaptability of the Mongols. From steppe cavalry primarily reliant on speed, mobility, and the power of the bow, they had begun to learn and apply siege techniques, even if their initial attempts, like the effort to flood Xingqing, were clumsy and unsuccessful. But that failure did not discourage them. On the contrary, it spurred them to seek out and effectively utilize the expertise of engineers and siege specialists from the very peoples they conquered. This was an invaluable lesson for later conquests, when they would face even more formidable and complex fortifications of the Jin dynasty and especially of the Khwarezmian Empire. Furthermore, Western Xia's initial submission followed by later betrayal deeply impressed upon Genghis Khan a harsh lesson about the necessity of utterly annihilating disloyal enemies, those powers that might stab him in the back. This brutal policy, while causing horrific humanitarian consequences, served as a powerful deterrent and became an integral part of the Mongols' psychological warfare strategy. The later destruction of Western Xia, therefore, was not merely a punitive military action. It was a stark message sent to the entire world about the dire consequences of challenging Mongol authority. B. The Dragon's Wrath, the Jin dynasty. After temporarily stabilizing the Western Front with the submission, however unreliable, of Western Xia, Genghis Khan's gaze now turned towards a larger target. A traditional and far more powerful enemy, the Jurchen Jin dynasty, which ruled over a vast and prosperous territory in northern China. The enmity between the Mongols and the Jin dynasty was not new, it was ancient, simmering through generations. The Jin, with its status as a powerful empire, had previously often applied a policy of using barbarians to control barbarians, divide and rule towards the Mongol tribes, covertly encouraging internal conflicts and internecine warfare among them to weaken them, preventing a unified Mongol power from emerging that could threaten its northern borders. One of the most painful and humiliating events the Mongols never forgot was the Jin's capture of Ambagai Khan, one of Genghis Khan's important predecessors in the effort to partially unify the tribes, and his exceptionally cruel execution. He was nailed to a wooden donkey and left to die. This deep-seated hatred was etched in their hearts, passed down from generation to generation. Therefore, when Genghis Khan succeeded in unifying all the Mongol tribes under a single banner in 1206, the Jin dynasty, instead of seeking reconciliation or recognizing his new status, continued to act with arrogance. They demanded that Genghis Khan submit and pay tribute to the Jin emperor as a vassal. For a man of Genghis Khan's immense pride and ambition, who had just been acclaimed as the great Khan of all Mongols, this demand was nothing short of an intolerable insult. It was the final straw, the last spark that ignited a large-scale war, a war that Genghis Khan decided to declare. Besides old enmity and present humiliation, the ambition to expand his territory southward, to seize the wealth and abundant resources of northern China, was also a significant, undeniable driving force behind the Mongol invasion. In 1211, the Great Campaign against the Jin dynasty officially began. One of the first pivotal battles, one that shaped the initial course of the war, was the Battle of Yehuling, Wild Fox Ridge. The Jin army, despite its absolute numerical superiority and better equipment, made serious tactical errors. They concentrated a massive force, estimated at hundreds of thousands, in a narrow and disadvantageous defensive position at Yehuling Pass, hoping to block the advance of the Mongol cavalry. But Genghis Khan, with his innate military genius and an effective intelligence network, crucial information came from the defection of a Kuden general, Shimo Mingan, from the Jin side, who revealed the enemy's deployment plans, grasped the Jin's intentions and the weaknesses in their disposition. He did not launch a frontal assault on the enemy's dense formation. Instead, the Mongol army, with the superior mobility of its cavalry, executed surprise, lightning-fast attacks on the Jin flanks and, especially, on their less protected rear. The sudden appearance of Mongol cavalry caused horrific chaos within the Jin ranks. Their already cumbersome and unwieldy formation quickly disintegrated. The battle turned into a massacre. Tens of thousands, some sources say hundreds of thousands, of Jin soldiers were annihilated or captured. The resounding victory at Yehuling was of immense significance. It destroyed a large part of the Jin's elite main army, completely shattered their northern defensive line, and, more importantly, it threw open the gates for the Mongols to advance deep into the rich territory of northern China. After the decisive victory at Yehuling, the Mongol army, under the brilliant command of Genghis Khan, poured into the North China plain like an unstoppable flood. Many important Jin strongholds fell one after another. Their ultimate target was Zhongdu, modern Beijing, the splendid and bustling capital of the Jin dynasty. The siege of Zhongdu began in 1213 and lasted for nearly 2 years, an incredibly arduous and bloody affair for both sides. The Mongols, by now more experienced in assaulting fortified cities thanks to their recruitment and use of Han Chinese and Khitan engineers, specializing in siege weaponry such as trebuchets, scaling ladders, and possibly early forms of gunpowder weapons, continuously attacked and pressured the city. Inside the city, the Jin defenders fought with tenacity and determination. But as time wore on, the situation within the city grew increasingly dire. Zhongdu gradually fell into a state of severe food shortage. Disease began to rage, and the morale of the troops and civilians steadily declined. Furthermore, many Khitan and Han Chinese generals within the Jin army, who harbored underlying conflicts with the Jurchen court, began to waver and secretly defected to the Mongol side, bringing with them vital intelligence and further weakening Zhongdu's defenses. Finally, in the summer of 1215, after desperate defensive efforts, Zhongdu could hold out no longer and fell. The Mongol army surged into the city. According to many historical accounts, the city suffered an incredibly severe sack and massacre, lasting for many days. Treasures were plundered, palaces were burned, and countless civilians were slaughtered. The fall of Zhongdu was a mortal blow to the Jin dynasty. The capture of Zhongdu and vast territories in northern China brought the Mongol Empire immense resources and manpower, significantly increasing their strength. The Jin dynasty, after losing its capital, was forced to move its capital south to Kaifeng. Its power severely weakened, and it was left controlling only a limited territory. The prestige and fear of the Mongol army's power resonated ever more strongly, spreading terror throughout neighboring states. The Mongol-Jin War would continue for many years thereafter, but these initial victories laid a solid foundation for the complete collapse of the Jin dynasty in the future. The campaign against the Jin dynasty once again demonstrated the extraordinary learning ability and adaptability of the Mongol army. From primarily relying on the strength of their cavalry and steppe warfare tactics, they had rapidly grasped and skillfully employed complex siege techniques, largely thanks to their willingness to attract and utilize experts and engineers from the very peoples they were conquering. This showed Genghis Khan's incredibly pragmatic strategic vision, where military effectiveness was prioritized above all else, transcending prejudices about methods or the origins of technology. Furthermore, the defections of Han Chinese and Khitan generals and soldiers from the Jin side not only severely weakened the enemy's strength, but also revealed deep-seated ethnic rifts and contradictions within the Jin dynasty, a weakness that Genghis Khan skillfully exploited. By promising generous rewards or using threats, he turned a segment of the enemy forces into his own, further augmenting the strength of the Mongol army. Finally, the tactic of widespread plunder and devastation in the North China Plain, while causing catastrophic humanitarian consequences, was not only aimed at gathering spoils and weakening the Jin's economic potential, but was also an extremely effective psychological warfare tactic. It destroyed infrastructure, caused panic and mass displacement among the populace, undermined the enemy's will to resist, and made the administration of occupied territories easier for the Mongols. The dragon's wrath from the steppe had truly descended. See, the storm from the east, the Khwarezmian campaign. After resounding victories in western Xia, and especially against the powerful Jin dynasty, the fame of Genghis Khan and the Mongol Empire had spread far and wide. At this time, to the west, another vast and powerful Islamic empire existed, the Khwarezmian Empire. This empire controlled an immense territory including Persia, Transoxiana, the land between the Amu Darya and Sur Darya rivers in Central Asia, and much of modern-day Afghanistan. Under the rule of Shah Muhammad II, Khwarezm was a major military power and an important commercial hub on the Silk Road. Initial relations between the fledgling Mongol Empire and the Khwarezmian Empire appeared to be quite amicable, at least on the surface. Genghis Khan, perhaps with the intention of establishing trade relations and gathering intelligence, sent a large trade caravan consisting of hundreds of merchants, carrying many valuable goods, to Otrar, an important trading city and administrative center on the northeastern border of Khwarezm. But a foolish and arrogant act by a Khwarezmian official ignited one of the most devastating invasions in human history. Inalchok, the governor of Otrar and a relative as nephew of Shah Muhammad I's mother, became suspicious of the Mongol trade caravan, perhaps out of greed to seize the valuable goods, or genuinely believing them to be spies, a possibility that cannot be entirely dismissed. Inalchok ordered the arrest and massacre of the entire caravan and confiscated all their goods. Only a few fortunate individuals managed to escape and bring the horrific news back to Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan, though immensely furious at this brutal act and blatant violation of international laws as per the customs of the time, trade caravans and envoys usually enjoyed immunity, still attempted to resolve the matter diplomatically. He sent an official delegation of 3 envoys to the Khwarezmian capital to meet Shah Muhammad II. His demand was clear: The Shah must hand over Inalchok to face Mongol punishment for the crime committed. But Shah Muhammad II, perhaps overconfident in his military strength or influenced by hawkish factions in his court, including his mother, who wielded great influence and was against Inalchok being punished, made a disastrous decision. He not only refused Genghis Khan's demand, but also ordered the execution of part of the envoy delegation, the head of the mission, and had the beards of the other two shaved off in humiliation before sending them back. This act, in the eyes of the Mongols and especially Genghis Khan, was an unforgivable insult, a direct challenge to the Great Khan's authority, and the gravest violation of diplomatic norms. It became the direct and undeniable casus bellis, cause for war for the invasion of Khwarezm. The storm from the east had been unleashed. Genghis Khan mobilized a colossal military force for this expedition, estimated at 90,000 to 200,000 troops. The exact number is still debated, including his most elite units and auxiliary forces from subjugated peoples. He prepared meticulously for the invasion, gathering intelligence on Khwarezm's terrain, army, and internal political situation. His strategy was a testament to military genius. He divided his army into multiple prongs of attack, utilizing the superior speed and mobility of his cavalry, sophisticated feints, and an effective intelligence system to surprise, divide, and destroy Khwarezm's numerically superior but poorly coordinated forces piecemeal. The main armies were placed under the command of Genghis Khan himself and his talented sons such as Jochi, Chagatai, Ojedi, and his youngest son but also a renowned general, Tolui. The invasion began in 1219, and the fall of Khwarezm's major cities occurred with breathtaking speed, spreading terror throughout Central Asia. Otrar Swot 2019 2000, this border city, where the war originated, where the crime against the Mongol trade caravan had taken place, was the first target. Inalchok, knowing he had no way out, organized a fierce defense. The siege lasted for several months, but eventually, after a Khwarezmian commander named Karasha, leading part of the garrison, defected and opened the city gates to the Mongols, Otrar fell. Inalchok was captured alive. According to legend, he suffered an exceptionally cruel death to pay for his actions. Molten silver was poured into his eyes and ears. Archaeological evidence at the Otrar site today shows traces of a siege and widespread destruction, although specifically identifying cultural layers and artifacts belonging to the Mongol siege of 1220 is challenging due to the overlapping of cultural layers over centuries. Bukhara, 1200 after Otrar, the Mongol army, under the direct command of Genghis Khan, executed a daring march, crossing the harsh Kizilkum Desert to capture the city of Bukhara, an important cultural and religious center, in a complete surprise attack. The city fell quickly after a few days of weak resistance. Only the citadel, where a contingent of the garrison held out, resisted for a short while longer before being overwhelmed and all its soldiers massacred. The populace of Bukhara was either enslaved, forcibly conscripted into subsequent sieges as human shields or laborers, or killed. The city was plundered and burned, and Bukhara's famous library, which housed countless precious manuscripts, was also consumed in the flames. Samarkand 1220, the official capital of the Khwarezmian Empire, Samarkand was one of the largest and wealthiest cities in the Islamic world at the time, strongly fortified with high walls and a large garrison. After Bukhara fell, Samarkand was isolated. The Mongols quickly besieged the city. They repulsed a sortie by the Khwarezmian garrison, which included formidable war elephants. Faced with the ferocious and relentless Mongol assault, and perhaps due to the weakness of the leadership, influential Islamic clergy within the city persuaded the populace and part of the army to surrender in the hope of clemency. But that hope did not materialize. The city was systematically plundered. Many inhabitants were enslaved or killed. A large number of skilled artisans were captured and deported to Mongolia or other parts of the empire to serve the Mongols. However, Samarkand, unlike many other cities, gradually recovered under the Pax Mongolica and once again became an important cultural and commercial center. Archaeological excavations at Afrasiab, the site of ancient Samarkand, have uncovered layers of destruction that can be directly linked to the Mongol invasion. Gurganjas Urgench and 2021, the former capital of Khwarezm, Gurganjas, also known as Urgench, situated in the fertile Amu Darya Delta, was a particularly difficult target for the Mongols due to its marshy terrain and the intricate network of canals surrounding the city. The Mongol army, initially commanded by the two princes Jochi and Chagatai, encountered many obstacles in assaulting the city. There were even disputes over command between the two princes, who disliked each other, forcing Genghis Khan to send his third son, Ogidi, known for his affable nature and conciliatory skills, to take unified command. The Mongols had to employ special siege techniques, such as using large mulberry tree logs, soaked in water to harden them, as projectiles for their massive trebuchets, or as giant battering rams to breach the city walls. After many months of siege and fierce house-to-house, street-by-street fighting, Gurganja finally fell. And its fate was perhaps the most tragic of all Khwarezmian cities. Gurganj suffered one of the most horrific massacres in history. The population was slaughtered in mass, regardless of age or sex. Afterwards, the Mongols destroyed the dams on the Amu Darya River, causing the entire region to be flooded, completely obliterating the city and turning a fertile land into a desolate swamp. Merv and Nishapur, Tolu's Khorasan campaign. After the main cities in Transoxiana had been captured and pacified fellers in the Mongol fashion, Genghis Khan assigned his youngest son, but also one of his most capable generals, Tolu, the task of subduing the rich and populous region of Khorasan in northeastern Persia. Tolu carried out a military campaign of systematic brutality aimed at extinguishing any thought of resistance and spreading utter terror. Great cities like Merv and Nishapur, renowned centers of Islamic culture and learning, were completely destroyed. According to contemporary historians, millions of people are said to have been killed in the massacres in these two cities and surrounding areas. These massacres, however horrific, were part of Mongol psychological warfare strategy, intended to crush the will of other peoples and prevent future rebellions. While cities fell one after another, Shah Muhammad II, the king of the Khwarezmian Empire, instead of organizing a unified and effective resistance, proved indecisive and weak. Faced with the Mongols' lightning, fast and unstoppable offensive, he dared not confront them directly, but continuously retreated westward, abandoning his cities to their fate. He was relentlessly pursued across Persia by two renowned Mongol generals, Subutai and Jibi. Eventually, Shah Muhammad I died a lonely and miserable death on a small, uninhabited island in the Caspian Sea in late 1220 or early 1221. But his son, Jalal al-Din Mangbarni, was a completely different character. Jalal al-Din was a courageous warrior and energetic leader. After his father's death, he rallied the remnants of the Khwarezmian army and continued the resistance against the Mongols with tenacity. He achieved some notable initial successes, most prominently the Battle of Parwan in 1221, where he defeated a Mongol army commanded by Shiji Kutuk, one of Genghis Khan's close commanders. This was one of the very few Mongol defeats in the entire campaign. However, due to internal conflicts within his own army, chieftains quarreling over the division of spoils, and the relentless pursuit by Mongol forces led by Genghis Khan himself, Jalal al-Din was eventually cornered. He was decisively defeated in a battle on the banks of the Indus River in late 1221. In a desperate situation, Jalal al-Din performed an act of incredible bravery. He spurred his horse and leaped into the raging Indus River to escape to the other side, into India. Legend has it that Genghis Khan, witnessing this courageous act by his adversary, exclaimed his admiration and told his sons that a father should have such a son. The Khwarezmian campaign once again demonstrated the almost absolute superiority of the Mongol army in speed, mobility, the effective collection and use of intelligence, the application of psychological warfare, spreading terror, calculated massacres in resisting cities as an example, and especially their rapid adaptation and mastery of the art of siege warfare, which was not their traditional strength. And the conquest did not stop there. After pursuing Shah Muhammad II to the Caspian Sea, the two renowned generals Subutai and Jibi received a special order from Genghis Khan. They were authorized to continue their advance westward to conduct an extensive strategic reconnaissance to explore unknown lands. This was a decision that demonstrated Genghis Khan's foresight and audacity. These two generals led an elite, though not overly large, Mongol army on a legendary march, a devastating circuit that spanned thousands of miles. They crossed the treacherous Caucasus Mountains, defeating the resisting forces of the powerful Kingdom of Georgia and other mountain tribes such as the Alans and the Kipchaks, also known as Cumans or Polovtsi, by using tactics of divide and rule. surprise attacks, and the unparalleled mobility of Mongol cavalry. The culmination of this reconnaissance expedition was the Battle of the Khalkha River in 1223, where a combined army of Rus principalities, precursors to later Russia and Cumans, though far more numerous, was lured into a trap by the Mongols and disastrously routed. This victory spread terror throughout Eastern Europe and provided the Mongols with invaluable intelligence about the lands, peoples, and military potential to the west. The raid by Subutai and Jibi was not merely an extended military campaign, it was a grand strategic reconnaissance expedition, demonstrating the independent operational capability, foresight, and extraordinary endurance of Mongol generals and soldiers. It also, intentionally or unintentionally, paved the way for later, larger-scale Mongol invasions of Europe. The Khwarezmian campaign, therefore, was a resounding testament to Genghis Khan's military genius and the almost unstoppable destructive power of the Mongol war machine. The Otrar incident, while perhaps an unacceptable provocation from the Khwarezmian side, may also have provided Genghis Khan with a perfect pretext to execute a pre-calculated invasion plan aimed at eliminating a potential rival in the West, completely controlling the vital trade routes of the Silk Road and further expanding the borders of his fledgling empire. The Mongol army's ability to quickly adapt and master the art of siege warfare, which was not their traditional strength, demonstrated a superior capacity for learning, assimilation, and integration of military technology, regardless of its origin. The legendary raid of Subutai and Jibi, covering thousands of miles through unfamiliar, rugged lands and achieving successive victories against various opponents, was truly a rare military feat in human history, a testament to the audacity, independent command capability, and extraordinary endurance of the Mongol army. The storm from the east had truly swept through Central Asia and reached the threshold of Europe. Part 4. The Steppe Sunsets, a legacy forged in blood and fire. 2020s 2027. The empire begins to take shape. Early administration and cultural exchange. After devastating conquests and resounding victories in both the east and the west, the Mongol Empire under the reign of Genghis Khan stretched across an unprecedentedly vast territory. Lands once fragmented by borders and traditional enmities were now unified under a single authority, albeit an authority established by iron and blood. But even amidst incessant warfare and widespread destruction, the first seeds of a new order, of a relative stability, began to be sown. This period, though not yet fully describable as the Pax Mongolica, Mongol peace of his successor's era, nevertheless showed its nascent elements. The unification of vast territories under a centralized ruling power, however harsh, unintentionally created initial conditions for greater safety and facility on the transcontinental trade routes. The Yam communication system, initially established primarily for military communication and the administrative decrees of the Great Khan, also indirectly supported the movement of merchants and envoys. Routes once fraught with danger from bandits and inter-state warfare became safer under Mongol control. This began to facilitate the gradual recovery and development of trade, connecting east and west in ways never before seen. A prominent and enduring feature in Genghis Khan's empire building process was his pragmatic policy of incorporating and utilizing the talents and technologies of conquered peoples. He held no racial or religious prejudices when seeking individuals capable of serving his objectives. Han Chinese and Persian engineers, especially those with deep expertise in siegecraft, in the construction and use of trebuchets, scaling ladders, and other siege engines, were highly valued and played an immensely important role in enabling the Mongol army, originally steppe cavalry, to capture the fortified cities of settled civilizations. Officials, scholars, and those with administrative skills from conquered cultures, such as the Uyghurs Khitans and Han Chinese, were also recruited into the empire's fledgling administrative apparatus, helping him manage vast and diverse territories more effectively. The conquests, despite their brutality and destructiveness, also unintentionally created unprecedented channels for cultural and technological exchange between different regions of the Eurasian continent. Ideas, religions, arts, agricultural techniques, medicine, astronomy, and various goods began to circulate on a much larger scale than before. The Mongols, with their pragmatic nature and curiosity, showed interest in learning and adopting useful knowledge and skills from other peoples. things that could help them consolidate and expand their empire. From Chinese gunpowder to Persian administrative techniques, everything was considered and, if useful, adopted. But it cannot be denied that the psychological impact of the Mongol conquests across the Eurasian continent was immense. The systematic brutality, the large-scale massacres in resisting cities, and their almost unstoppable military effectiveness sowed extreme terror and despair. Many ancient civilizations felt the foundations of their world trembling. The image of Mongol horsemen became a haunting specter in the collective memory of many peoples. However, alongside this profound fear, the military strength, tight organization, and iron discipline of the Mongol Empire also compelled respect and admiration from many. Some nations and peoples, realizing the futility of resistance, chose the path of adaptation or cooperation to survive, and even to find opportunities within the new world order established by the Mongols. One of the most tragic and lasting consequences of the Mongol Wars of Conquest was the severe demographic changes in many regions, particularly in Central Asia, Persia, and northern China. Large-scale massacres, famines resulting from destroyed crops, and epidemics that followed in the wake of armies significantly reduced populations in conquered areas. Many once bustling and populous cities became desolate ruins. Infrastructure, especially the complex and sophisticated irrigation systems in Central Asia, which had been the foundation of developed agriculture for centuries, was heavily damaged during the wars, causing long-term consequences for agricultural production and the lives of the people, turning many fertile lands into wasteland. This destruction, though perhaps not always the initial intention, was an inseparable part of the price paid for building a colossal empire on the foundation of military conquest. The early stages of what would later be called the Pax Mongolica, its seeds sown even during the turbulent reign of Genghis Khan, were truly a historical paradox. The most brutal methods of conquest, destruction on a massive scale, simultaneously and unintentionally, laid the groundwork for an era of transcontinental trade and communication of unprecedented scale and safety. By unifying vast lands under a single, albeit often harsh, authority, the Mongols inadvertently created a safer space for trade routes that had previously been fraught with danger from warfare and banditry among petty states. The success of the Mongol Empire, therefore, was not solely based on invincible military might. It also lay in their astonishing pragmatism in adopting, integrating, and deploying technology and personnel from the very civilizations they had conquered. This demonstrated a flexible imperial management mindset, prioritizing efficiency and results over ideological purity or racial exclusivity. However, one cannot and should not ignore the catastrophic demographic consequences and cultural devastation in many places. The conquests caused severe population decline in many regions, permanently altering social structures and ethnic maps in some areas, while leaving deep scars and traumatic memories in the history of the affected peoples. The empire was taking shape, but its cost was immense. The final campaign and the death of the Great Khan, the 1225-1227. After returning from the campaign to conquer Khwarezm in the west, a campaign that had lasted many years and significantly expanded the territory of the Mongol Empire, Genghis Khan, though now in his 60s, had not quenched his thirst for conquest or his will to punish oathbreakers. His next target, and also the final one in his life of warfare, was the kingdom of Western Xia. He never forgot and never forgave the treachery of the Tanguts when they refused to provide troops for the Khwarezmian campaign and, furthermore, conspired to ally with the enemies of the Mongols. For him, this was an unacceptable betrayal, a potential threat in his rear that needed to be completely eliminated. He had made an iron resolve this time. He would not merely subjugate Western Xia as a vassal, he would utterly destroy the kingdom, erasing it from the map of history. The Mongol army, once again under the direct command of Genghis Khan, invaded Western Xia in 1225. The campaign unfolded with unprecedented ferocity. The cities and villages of the Tangut people were systematically devastated. The Mongols no longer showed the leniency they might have in previous encounters. They besieged, stormed, and, after capture, usually massacred most of the population. The resistance of the Western Xia army, though at times fierce, was no match for the might and brutality of the Mongol forces carrying out the Great Khan's punitive command. But it was during the command of this Western Xia campaign when final victory was very near, that Genghis Khan, who had endured countless battles and overcome so many dangers, suddenly died in August 1227. The exact cause of his death remains a historical mystery to this day, a subject of much debate and speculation, with various theories proposed by historians and ancient sources. The Secret History of the Mongols, the most important epic of the Mongol people, records that he fell from his horse during a hunt the previous winter and later died from a high fever resulting from his injuries. Persian historical sources, such as those by the historian Juvayni, who lived not long after Genghis Khan's time, suggest he died of illness, possibly due to the harsh climate of the Western Shia region, not agreeing with him. The explorer Marco Polo, who traveled to Asia decades later, told a different story, that he died from an arrow wound sustained during a siege. There are even romantic or vengeful legends telling that he was assassinated in his wedding bed by a Western Shia princess forced to be his concubine. More recently, some medical, historical studies, based on symptoms described in ancient documents and the duration of his illness, have hypothesized that bubonic plague, a common and dangerous disease at that time, might have been the true cause. Whatever the reason, his passing was an immense loss for the fledgling Mongol Empire. Before his death, Genghis Khan, though in the throes of severe illness, retained his clarity of mind and issued crucial final commands. Militarily, he ordered that Western Shisha must be completely destroyed, sparing no one, thus fulfilling his oath. Regarding succession, a matter of utmost importance for the stability of the empire, he designated his third son, Ogidi, as his successor to the throne of Great Khan. This choice was not accidental. His eldest son, Jachi, had died shortly before, or there were issues regarding the legitimacy of his lineage, as his mother had once been abducted, and his second son, Chagatai, though renowned for his strictness and understanding of the Yassa law, might have lacked the necessary flexibility and magnanimity to rule a vast and diverse empire. Ogidi, in contrast, was known for his generous and approachable nature and his ability to maintain unity among his brothers and commanders. Perhaps Genghis Khan saw in Ogidi the qualities needed more for a ruler than for a mere conqueror. The death of Genghis Khan was kept an absolute secret, even from most of the army engaged in the Western Shia campaign. Only a few of his closest commanders and relatives knew the truth. This was to avoid chaos and loss of morale within the army while the crucial campaign was still unfinished, and more importantly, to ensure that the succession proceeded smoothly, without contestation or rebellion. His body was secretly transported back to Mongolia and buried at an undisclosed location near the sacred mountain of Burkhan Khaldun, in accordance with his last wishes. Legend has it that the escorting funeral procession killed everyone they met on their way to keep the final resting place of the Great Khan a secret. After Genghis Khan's death, the Mongol army, under the command of his generals, brutally and thoroughly carried out his final order regarding Western Shia. The Western Shia capital, Sinking, was captured and destroyed. The population was massacred en masse. The kingdom of Western Shia, with its unique culture and long history, was completely wiped off the map, becoming a bloody lesson about the consequences of defying the will of the Mongol Great Khan. Subsequently, in 1229, at a convened Kurultai, Ogidi was formally enthroned as the second Great Khan of the Mongol Empire, continuing the legacy of conquest and empire building left by his father. However, another legacy that Genghis Khan had also established, the system of ulus, the division of vast territories of the empire among his sons and grandsons, to govern also unintentionally sowed the seeds for the future division and fragmentation of the vast Mongol Empire. After the initial strong leaders were gone, the death of Genghis Khan amidst the fierce Western Shia campaign further highlighted the central, almost irreplaceable, role of his personal will and genius leadership in the Mongol war machine. His final command for the destruction of Western Shia was carried out to the letter by his successors and generals, demonstrating the power and deep entrenchment of his orders within the Mongol command structure, even after his passing. The absolute secrecy surrounding his death and the brutal measures taken to ensure that secrecy during the funeral procession back to his homeland reflected the Mongols' profound understanding of the psychological importance of their supreme leader's invincible image and the potential risk of instability during the sensitive period of power transition. The choice of Ojedi as successor, a man known for his generosity, listening skills, and perhaps a better ability to maintain unity in an increasingly diverse empire, instead of other sons who might have been militarily stronger like Chagatai, showed that Genghis Khan, in his final years, had carefully considered the qualities necessary to rule and sustain a vast empire, not just the capacity for relentless conquest. The sun of the steppe had set, but its light still illuminated the path for his successors. Conclusion: the unfinished conquest and the seeds of a global empire. When Genghis Khan closed his eyes for the last time in 1227, his extraordinary life had reached its end, but the legacy he left behind was only just beginning to shape the world. From an orphan child, cast out by his own tribe, struggling for survival on the harsh Mongolian steppe, Temüjin had risen through sheer iron will and extraordinary military talent. He not only unified the perennially fragmented and warring Mongol tribes, ending centuries of internal conflict, but also conquered vast territories in northern China and Central Asia, laying the foundations for the most powerful military empire the world had ever known, and an entirely new social order on the steppe. By the time of his death, Genghis Khan had left a solid foundation for his successors to build upon. It was a formidable military legacy, with an army scientifically organized under the decimal system, possessing iron discipline, absolute loyalty to the Great Khan, and incredibly effective battle tactics, proven through countless victories. He had also promulgated the Great Yassa, a common, albeit harsh, law that created a legal and moral framework for the entire empire, helping to maintain order and unity. An initial administrative system, with the versatile Keshig Guard as its nucleus and the efficient Yam Post system, had been established, allowing for governance and communication across an ever-expanding territory. And perhaps just as importantly, he had instilled in the Mongol people a nascent imperial ideology, a belief in the mandate of heaven, that they were chosen by the eternal blue sky to rule the world. But Genghis Khan's conquest, however great, was still unfinished. Many vast lands to the west and south remained outside Mongol control. Powerful empires like the Southern Song in China and the kingdoms of Europe had yet to feel the full force of Mongol hooves. This task would be left to his sons and grandsons, who would continue to expand the empire to unimaginable limits, from the shores of the Pacific Ocean to the gates of Europe. Genghis Khan's legacy is a complex one, forged from both blood and fire, from destruction and creation. He was a brutal conqueror, responsible for the deaths of millions and the collapse of many civilizations. But he was also a brilliant unifier, a legislator, a man who created an empire that spurred trade and the transmission of technology and ideas on an unprecedented scale, laying the groundwork for an early, flat world. Whether loved or hated, praised or condemned, no one can deny that Genghis Khan was one of the most influential figures in human history, a man who truly changed the course of the world. The wind from the steppe that he initiated became a global storm, and its echoes still resonate today, reminding us of the extraordinary power of human will and the ceaseless transformations of history. His own sun may have set, but the dawn of the Mongol Empire had only truly begun.